the Mother Teresa story it's a beautiful story, not just because it happened to me, but I felt like it had a much broader scope, the story. It's really a general Baba story, so I hope you'll enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was about 1984, 1985, somewhere in there. And my husband, Jerry, and I wanted to bring our children to India for the first time. And, you know, the Mandali always said, wait until they're 7, 8 years old. So we had kind of hit that point. Erica, my daughter, was either having her 7th or her 8th birthday in India, which was nice because it was the same day as Casey. So they had a little party together. And I'm sort of dating it by her being 7 or 8 years old. But interestingly enough, this was a big trip, you know, bringing the whole family and children for the first time. So we were going to be flying out of New York. And I have a lot of Catholic relatives. Even though I was born in Japan and I grew up in a Buddhist environment, and my parents were very interested in world religions, etc., I had this Catholic family that was very Catholic. And all my mother's family, there was like 4 or 5 of them, and everybody got married, so now we're looking at like 10 people, and they all had 5 or 6 children. So a family reunion, we're talking like 40 or 50 people, and no one understood why we had to go to India and why we were bringing these young children to India. So they kept saying things to me like, don't you know that God is in your own backyard? Why do you have to go all the way around the world to find God? So, you know, it wasn't like super tense, but it was a little bit like rubby. That's not really a word, but you get what I mean.
It's a word.
And I had to grapple with it. How could I make them understand that this was a special trip and the children were really looking forward to it and that we would be safe? So it just popped out of my head, well, we're going to go see Mother Teresa. I mean, it just came out of my mouth out of left field. And the children had been studying Mother Teresa in catechism. You know, they have to go every Saturday morning for Catholic training, you might say, or philosophy might be a better word. But it just came out of my mouth with no forethought. It just plopped out. And the minute it did, I thought, oh, I guess we're going to have to go to Calcutta. You know, we'll have to see her ashram and do all that. So it added another pod to the trip. And it's not close between Bombay, Ahmednagar, and Calcutta. It's the other side of India. But I had said it, and I felt like Baba would want me to keep my promise. So we were visiting with some friends in New York that also had family in Bombay. And as Indian families are, if you're going, then you are the next carrier. So they gave us extra suitcases of clothing. There was money that had to get somehow to Calcutta. So there was, you know, more to the trip adding in. So we said, fine, we're happy to go. We're happy to take these things to relatives in Bombay. So we get to Bombay. We were visiting with this other family there, and they were very sweet to us. They wanted us to stay in a hotel that had American plumbing. That was important, that the children have safe facilities. So, you know, you arrive, it's the middle of the night, nobody's thinking very clearly, and we get to this hotel, and there's not American plumbing. And they were really upset, because they had gone to a fair expense to make sure that everything would be right for these young children. So everyone's scrambling and trying to get it right. We're having to move rooms. Other families kept coming in to stay in our room like it was becoming a dorm. The hotel somehow was like booking every bed, and it didn't matter that it was just your family. It was, you know, you're in another country. Things don't always happen the way you expect. But this our hosts really said to us, you do not want to get within 100 miles of Calcutta. You think Bombay is like wild? Forget going to Calcutta. So we will take care of this money that has to go there. We'll take care of these suitcases. And the more we thought about it, we realized we came for Meher Baba. That was the reason for the journey. And this whole thing about Calcutta and Mother Teresa was going to have to wait, that Baba came first. So the next day we got on the train that, you know, goes through the Ghats, and you see orangutans hanging in the trees and people bringing little cups of chai. It was so charming. But we finally got to Ahmednagar. We were registering in the trust compound, and Jack Small came out to visit, and we were talking, and somehow I blurted out this whole story that we also had to go to Calcutta, that I had made this promise that we were going to meet Mother Teresa. And he says to me, it's a good thing you didn't go to Calcutta, because Mother Teresa is coming here in 2 days. So I began to realize the magnitude of this thing. Had we tried to fulfill, like, pleasing the family and had gone to Calcutta, we would not only have missed her, because she was in Ahmednagar. I mean, that would have been like such a slap in the face. Like, what are your priorities, Mimi? Do you want to please all your relatives? Or did you go for Meher Baba? So we, obviously, Baba let us make the right choice. And there we were. So I said to Jack, you have to get us tickets. He goes, oh no, these tickets have been sold out for months. Every Catholic, every Knights of Columbus person, every school child is going to this event. It was going to be at the Ahmednagar College, and she was going to be giving a general talk, kind of like on what I would call the football field, and they had erected the most magnificent pandal over the entire football field. If you looked up, it was like looking at the top of an American quilt, you know, all pieced cotton fabrics, beautiful, with a little border hanging down that rippled in the breeze. It was so colorful, gorgeous. But it would give everyone shade that was there to see her or meet her. So at any rate, Jack said, there are no tickets, you know, no way. And I just said, Jack, you have to get us tickets. So he complied somehow. I don't know what he did or who he bribed, but he got the 4 tickets for the 4 of us to go. And we had an extra day before the event. So somehow we were able to, people found out that we were going. I think Gary Kleiner had planned to go. Jack, of course. Gwendolyn, were you there at the time? There were 1 or 2 others. So people came up to us at the Pilgrim Center where we were staying and gave us money to contribute to her work. So we put it all in an envelope, and Jack came up with a beautiful Baba little card that Baba looked like Jesus, you know, the two together. And the card said something like, I have come to sow the seed of love in your hearts. You know, a general, loving, generous comment. So in with the money goes the little card. We had it in our business envelope. And so the next day comes, and we get a ride to Ahmednagar College. And the way it was, the college has a beautiful entrance road, kind of tree-lined boulevard. And the little school boys in their uniforms, they all had the hair the same way, parted on one side, combed over like this, and they were completely, perfectly clean and still. they were standing like little sentinels, between all of these trees on the entrance road. And they stood there for hours because she was hours late, probably 2 to 3 hours late. But in India, it's India time, so everyone just waits. And these little schoolboys, they had to have been 6, 7, 8 years old. Can you imagine American kids? They'd be like hacky sack, playing with each other, doodling on something. But these children were aware of the impact on their life, to meet her in person, to be the entry for her passage. So they were, so respectful and wonderful. So we drove in through this line of boys and came to this large field. They had set up a little dais in the front with a raised platform, and there were chairs behind, a podium for her. And then there was a grassy area where a lot of the other school children were sitting. And then the line of chairs started behind that. And it went all the way back the length of this field. So there were, I'm just guessing, and you know how numbers are for me, it could have been 20,000 people, it could have been 40,000. I don't have a way to register that, but we're talking packed all the way around the perimeter of this field, and everyone's sitting under this colorful pandal, and we all just waited. People chatted and talked, but it was a kind of a hushed, people would sort of talk quietly to each other respectfully, because you never knew when she was going to come. She could be coming in 5 minutes. There were no announcements like, we know she's running an hour late, be patient. So we waited. And Jack had gotten these magical seats. They were right in the front. Unbelievable. So we waited and waited. And eventually she came. And she had an entourage of cars, like a big political caravan. Her nuns, some of them were with her. Various people, I guess, from Ahmednagar, maybe from a Catholic church there, or Knights of Columbus. So this entourage came in, and she walked in, and she was the height of my daughter, who was, as I say, 7 or 8 years old. Wow. So she was like under 5 feet tall. She was tiny. But she had these hands, like I have these long piano fingers. Her hands were bigger than mine. Whoa. And she's a worker. She works in the fields and washing people and cleaning. But she had these beautiful hands. And she came and sat down, and an announcer came to the front of the dais there and said, "And now the Knights of Columbus representative wants to garland Mother Teresa." And then another Catholic group came to garland. So there was always a representative who would get up on the stage, give her a garland, do a namaste like that. And Erica and I had our little envelope, and Jack had said, "Why don't you and Erica go up and give the money?" Because her ministry is with women and her nuns, so it would be nice for a female to go. So we said, fine, happy to do that. So there must have been 7 or 8 different representatives to get up and make their presentation to her. So finally the announcer says, "And now from Avatar Meher Baba's Pilgrim Center, come this, someone will come." And Eric and I stand up, but everybody else stood up. So all the children stood up in front of us, everybody behind us stood up, and everyone's cheering and clapping, and we couldn't get to the stage because you couldn't really get through. So the announcer had to keep saying it over and over. "And now from Avatar Meher Baba, can't get onto the stage." Eventually we do, but the audience recognized that Baba was the avatar. And even though this was Mother Teresa and the total respect and love for her, it's also the seat of Baba's work. And people knew his effect, of course. So it was like a group experience getting onto the stage. But eventually we do. And Erica had the envelope, and Mother Teresa comes over to her, and she put her hands on Erica's head. And I was telling you, she had these big hands that you felt like you were covered by a cape with these hands. So she put her hands over Erica's head, and she brought her nose to Erica's nose. And she was looking in Erica's eyes, and Erica looking at hers. And Erica said she lost all sense that there was anyone else there. It was a private moment, and everything dropped away. The sense of time dropped away, the sense of place dropped away. And that's like all that existed in the world, was that energy between the eyes. And she felt like there was an energy that came into her and washed through her, was the experience she had. So after a period of time, they kind of drew away, and Erica was able to hand her the envelope and say that the various people from the Pilgrim Center wanted to make this offering to her. And she was very pleased. She didn't like look in the envelope, but you could tell it was a fat little envelope. And she was very pleased. And then she turned to me, and I didn't really know like what's the custom, but I just figured, you know, do a namaste to her. That would work. So I do this, and she comes right up to me and puts her hands over my hands. So now her nose is like an inch from my nose, and she looked into my eyes the same way she did with Erica. And I also had that sense that there was no one else around. There was no sound, there were no other people. That's the whole world is like right there. And then I also realized she sees everything. She sees every lie I ever told in kindergarten. She sees all of it, you know, all the stuff that's not so good. Maybe she sees some good stuff, but it was a little like being undressed. You know, it's that sense of she sees everything. And then this kind of waterfall of energy like washed it all clean. And it went out through my feet, up through her, circled again through her eyes into me. And I kept having this sense that it's like a new beginning. You're washed completely clean. And I begin to feel that she sees the real self, the soul. So she sees that potential for truth with a capital T, light with a capital L, love, you know, all those aspects of God she sees. It's like, oh, they exist. They must be there if she sees them. So then there's that sense of that she's bringing up the real you. That's what she's looking for. She's not looking at that little lie I told in kindergarten. She's looking for your true self. And then this kind of waterfall washing experience became somehow electrical. So then it felt like a current of energy was rolling. And it did a three loops through. And the other sense I had was that we are the same. That yes, she's able to find good in me, but it's the same self that's coming through her into me, that we are one. We're all one. In my mind, it lasted 2 hours. Right. But it probably lasted about 3 minutes, maybe something like that. Longer than a regular greeting, but I had no sense of time at all. It was a huge experience. So eventually we drew back. So now Erica and I are on one side of her. She's facing the audience, and Gary Kleiner was there. So Gary just jumps up on the dais. He gets there. He's not going to be outdone by some female. So pop up he goes, and she looks at him, and I think they bowed to each other, did a namaste. She didn't embrace him, but she, you know, respectfully honored him. And she said, you know, who are you or where are you from? And Gary said, I'm from Russia. And so she turns to the audience. this is before the Berlin Wall had fallen.
Mm-hmm.
There was still that nuclear threat between America and Russia. And she says to the whole 40,000 people, look at this. Meher Baba can bring together people from America and people from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole place went nuts. I mean, you would have thought it was Christmas, Halloween, New Year's, everything rolled into one. And they were ecstatic that Meher Baba could make that kind of adjustment between these two power countries who were, you know, rubbing wrong with each other. So you never knew what was going to happen, you know, in this situation. But, you know, things died down. We left the stage and went and sat down. And she gave a talk. She spoke in English, and it was translated to a couple of the different Indian dialects. But she basically spoke about giving what you can within your sphere. In other words, there's a lot of work to be done in the world to take care of people who maybe fall through the cracks. You know, her ministry is with death and dying. It's also to children that, you know, babies that the parent can't take care of. So they have, you know, adopted a ministry to children. But she gave many examples of Hindu families that might take in a Muslim child if the parents had died or something was wrong. And they didn't try to turn the Muslim child into a Hindu, but they would raise that child lovingly and honor its Hindu roots. And then she gave another example of a Muslim family taking on a Hindu child and raising that child with respect for his or her religion. So she said, you know, that she can't minister to all the world's needy people, but if we, each of us, reached out within our own family to, you know, a relative who might be on the outskirts somehow, or within our own community, or within our own faith community, if we each could minister within our own area, really the needs of the world could be met on a much broader level. So that was sort of her appeal. And at the end, she did talk a little bit about not having abortion, giving the child up for adoption, letting people minister to that child in whatever way was right, through different agencies or families that needed to have a child. So then things adjourned, and a smaller group of us wound up going to the Ahmednagar Club for a luncheon. And the club had put out a beautiful spread of shrimp and fruit and all kinds of cocktail foods. And it was a beautiful buffet, you could say. Mother Teresa and her nuns ate separately in a little quiet reception room behind. And they didn't eat the shrimp and all the fancy club food. They ate very simply, I imagine, like rice and dal, something of their simplicity. And she actually wore the cotton sari that you see most of the time in the pictures. She wasn't dressed like she was going to a fancy club. She was not wearing silk or, you know, all kinds of bangles. So she ate quietly by herself with her nuns, and then came out to meet the 100 guests that were there at the club. So Jack Small, had managed to wangle us these tickets to the club, which was incredibly amazing that he did that. But it gave us an opportunity to speak with her in private. Mm-hmm. So somewhere along the line, before I had the chance to meet her, I had heard that various other Baba lovers had met her over the years, some on planes going to and from India, and that she knew about Meher Baba. I think it was Barry Alpert one time from Wilmington, met her on a plane, and had even given her a little, like that New York World's Fair brochure, kind of little handout about Baba, universal message, the prayers. And he said they had said prayers together on that plane. So I knew she was comfortable with Baba. And then again, Jack came up with a beautiful photograph of Baba, kind of a head and shoulders. The photograph looked, again, Baba looked so much like Jesus, you know, when they were both around 30, 33 years old. So this picture of Baba was so lovely, and it had a beautiful quote at the bottom about love. It was framed, and so Jack gave it to me and said, why don't you and Erica present this to Mother Teresa? So after her simple lunch, she came out with her nuns, and they were kind of standing behind her like in a semicircle. She was the point person. So she came right toward Erica and I, and we gave her this picture and said we'd love for her to have it if she would like to have it. And she was so gracious. She gave the expression that this was the gift she had always wanted all her life. This was like the big Christmas gift. I mean, she really was so blown away by the love coming from this picture. And then she handed it to the nuns, and they, you know, circled it from each one to the next, and they all looked equally moved and respectful of this photo. And she said to me, we will bring this to Calcutta. In our main place, we have up on the wall pictures of all the different masters, Ram, Krishna, Buddha. It wouldn't have Muhammad, but she said, we will put this picture of Baba there in our main place. And then she said, I know who Meher Baba is. And I just looked at her, and she said, Meher Baba was one of the first to bring attention to the lives of the lepers, to wash their feet, to say they were beautiful souls caught in an ugly cage. She gave that quote. And then she said, later, Albert Schweitzer continued that work, and then she continued that work. But she said, it was Meher Baba who brought it to our attention. And she said a few other things about Baba. She was obviously very comfortable with his work that he had done, not only within the region, but within all of India. And she was just pleased to be in our presence. She was so gracious. And after, you know, various ones talked to her a little bit more. I can't remember other parts of the conversation, but it was just very sweet. And then she spoke with some of the other guests that were there. And at the end, there was a little bell, you know, it was time for her to leave. She grabbed both my children. And she had Aaron's arm under one side and Erica under the other. And she took off with them. She took off across this field. You know, the car was 50 yards away, maybe more. And I thought to myself, there go my children. You can't really tackle her, you know. You gotta just let them go. She knows what she's doing. And they thought too, oh, here we go. This is our new life. And she just tucked them in with her and marched for that car. And just before she got in the car, she let them go. And I thought, that was a close one. But she had an affinity for these children. And she was so charming. Really, in every way, she was charming. She just made you feel, as an individual, that you were totally accepted. For everything in you, you were totally accepted. So the day was really magnificent. That even the sense of her speaking and talking about what each one of us could do within our life to help her ministry. Of course we can give money and we can talk about her work and read her books, but essentially she was putting out an appeal to each one of us. Do what you can within your atmosphere, within your home, within your city or community or church. It was pretty incredible. So we had this experience, and I started to think, oh, what a blessing this is that she let us have this experience of just being with her. And I thought, my relatives will be so pleased that somehow I had kept that promise. And yet, that little desire to make them comfortable, I felt like not only did Baba give me and Erica this personal experience, but she gave it to my whole family. So I purchased postcards in India, the ones that I thought they would relate to. You know, the beauty of India, the bougainvillea spilling over the garden at the Pilgrim Center, something that would look like an Italian Catholic monastery, you know, like I wanted them to be okay that we were there. So I found these beautiful photographs, postcards, and I took them into Baba's Samadhi. I wrote letters to each of the families. I put them on the Samadhi. And I told them that we had the opportunity to meet Mother Teresa, that the children had had that opportunity, and that I knew her blessing extended to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I mailed all the cards. And I really felt that Baba answers, if our desires are right, that he answers all of the little desires we have that are appropriate. And the larger context. That's what made it so sweet to me. That he took care of all of the spiritual concerns that my family had. And allowed them to kind of have the experience of meeting Mother Teresa in a way. Through us, they would have that experience of who she was, what her ministry was about. And then later, I guess when we came back to the States, I had the opportunity to tell this story in the meeting place. And various people had had chances to meet her, maybe on an airplane or here or there. So it extended to that community, this sense that she was comfortable with Baba, that she respected Baba's work with the lepers, the caste system, the musts. And then, I guess the next time I went to India, there was a Catholic bishop who was visiting from Rome, and he had the office to reach out to various of the world, what do you say, outreach organizations through the Pope. That was his job. And remarkable that he was in India, but some people knew that I was Catholic and that it might be nice for me to give him a tour of Marazad or Marabad, but it gave us a chance to talk, and I must have told him this Mother Teresa story, and he said that there was an Indian man who was part of like a Knights of Columbus group, and they had a ministry to give monies to Mother Teresa for her work. So this gentleman would meet with her every 6 months or once a year and would bring her money, and they would talk, and she might share about what was happening within her ministry at the moment, and he would share the sentiments coming from his church and his community. So they had regular contact. The last time they got together, she said to him, "Do you have any recording devices on you?" He had a suitcase. And he said, "No." but she said, let me see in your suitcase. So he opened the suitcase and showed her what was in it, that there was no recording device. And he was also a man who knew about Meher Baba and Meher Baba's work within India, of course, throughout the world. So they began to talk about Meher Baba. And she again said, I know who Baba is. She said, it's not the time for that to come out. It wouldn't be appropriate at this point. But I just want you to know, I know who Baba is. And somehow it had come to me that there had been a little bit of a, what do you say? Not really an argument, but maybe you could say a heated discussion between Mother Teresa and the Pope, that he wanted her, as a Catholic, especially with people who are dying, to give the sacrament of extreme unction, that you bless the person, and in a way, not really try to convert them, but you're blessing them, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, using the Catholic language. And she said no. She said, it wouldn't be appropriate. You must pray with that person within their language and their philosophy and their faith. So she would pray with a Buddhist person, a Buddhist prayer, a Hindu, a Muslim, whichever faith the person was. So somehow I knew that they had had words about this, and she held her ground, that this was her ministry, and she felt that was the way to be the most respectful of the one who was dying. It's not the time for a liturgical argument. You just put them at peace, focus them on their view of God. So somehow that came into this whole story when she said, I know who Baba is. She was including him in that whole circle of the prophets, the holy men. So now we're jumping back to when I was about 18 years old. I had gone to college, and I saw people walking around campus with Baba buttons on. And I had asked, who is that? And someone would say, oh, that's Meher Baba. So I just remembered. I was born in Japan. I grew up in a Buddhist culture, and world religions were important to me. I wanted to have a philosophy that was inclusive of the different world religions. And I felt very much that at their root, they're the same. It's one's love for God, and then how you behave in the world, your ethics or your philosophy. It's pretty much all the same, if we boil it down. So in college, I started studying Hinduism, Buddhism. I took classes in Judaism. I was a philosophy major, but I was also focusing on intentional communities. What makes people come together to live together around a certain philosophical theme that allows you to get out of ego arguments? If there's a goal, everyone's working toward the same goal, you really can do a lot to change the world or make an effect more than one individual. So I was taking various classes. At some point, perhaps in my sophomore year, I was given the job on campus to head up the Religious Life Association, it was called, RLA. So there was student government and there was religious life. But it also meant social life. Everything that wasn't political fell into my camp. So I had conference money, and I could plan various conferences, bring speakers that would talk about cultural things or spiritual things. I had money for that. And the other thing I had to do was have host these interfaith teas. So, and I worked with the chaplain, so I had to find people on campus, students or faculty from different religions, and invite them to come for tea. So people could just nicely talk with each other, get to know each other. People wouldn't feel isolated. There were some students from Iran or Egypt, and they were, you know, on an American campus, a minority in terms of where they were coming from. So by being invited to these teas, it gave them a sense of belonging to the larger community. So they actually were wonderful. There was only one Baba lover that I knew. And it wound up being this theater professor, Jerry Hodgen. So I had to keep inviting him. Like every month, I had to invite Jerry to come to these teas. I never took any theater classes, but he was a wonderful individual, and he was really a good representative of Baba. And then Jerry, respectfully, if he wanted to host an event for Amar Tithi or Baba's birthday, then he would have to invite me, right? Because I had invited him, that was like polite. So I would have to go to all the Baba meetings, and he'd give me a quote, you know, this Baba quote or that. So I would have to read these Baba quotes. And they were wonderful. Baba's quotes and the messages he gave just fit with Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism. They just seemed to fit. So later, we were getting ready for spring break, and I guess I have to precede this a little. The kind of course of study that we had was called a 4-1-4. So you were on campus for 4 months, you took a month to work in your field, and then back for 4 months. So during that 1 month, because I was studying religious communities like that, I would go to various groups or communities and see, like, how are they doing? Okay? So one year, I went to the Mohawk Reservation in New York, between New York and Canada. The border actually ran through the middle of the reservation. And I was looking at, within that Native American society, how do they make decisions? How do they honor their philosophy? How does it bring them peace? And then the next year, I wound up going to a Christian community that was very kind of strict. Hellfire and damnation. You are born with original sin, and you act out of original sin. And it's only by the grace of God that you ever do anything good. It was on Cape Cod. It was in the winter that I was there. And I was actually there 40 days and 40 nights. And it was, for me, my experience only, was like being thrown into the desert. I was not loved when I was there. Everyone was extremely critical. My time was not my own. And as an athlete in school, I had to keep training all the time. I couldn't run when I was there. I could never be alone. You had an hour a day that you were supposed to go to this little chapel and pray. You couldn't even pray your own prayers. They had a list. New carpet for the chapel. You know, someone is sick, this, that, and the other. Everything was prescribed. So there was no individual time. And for some reason, they changed my name. They called me by my formal name, which I won't even tell you. You know, you had to wear lower skirts, things like that, dress very conservatively. I lived in a house of just women, and they didn't want anybody hugging each other, you know.
Wow.
It was very strict. And I thought that maybe my own philosophy was too broad, you might say. and I thought that I should go to this community and see the kind of grassroots of Christian communities. But it didn't work for me. And it wound up being a very brainwashing situation. I could have no contact with the outside world, no letters, no phone calls. I was supposed to obey their doctrine for those 40 days and 40 nights. It became very confusing to me. My mind was like a ping pong match. You know, I would think one thought, and then I would hear their rebuttal, but it's really this. And they would say to me, God has blessed you to be here to learn the truth. And if you don't follow it, you're going to hell. I mean, you have been given the chance to see how the cosmology really works, how God treats us, and you have to follow. So when I left there, philosophically, I was just confused, I was depressed. I hadn't been loved during that time, really, for who I was as a person. I'd been criticized, disciplined, punished, all kinds of things, but I was not really embraced. And as I had to begin to undo that brainwashing, I had to keep a journal to turn into my sociology professor. And he basically helped me see the various steps of brainwashing, how you revert somebody's mind.
Wow.
So I did a lot of running once I got back to school. And it was winter, and it was gray, and snowy, and rainy. And I just ran and cried, and ran and cried, and tried to just like get this thing out of me. At the same time, someone said to me, Mimi, if you didn't feel love there, then that can't be the truth. It can't be. Because basically God is love. And if you didn't feel that experience, then you don't have to believe what they said. So I decided I can't really focus on Jesus right now. That experience is like way painful. So I'm just going to focus on getting to know God better. So then I started taking Judaism. And I thought, I'm just focusing on God the Father. And, these other world religion classes were happening. So I was back to I need a philosophy that is inclusive, not exclusive. So when this theater professor said to me, for spring break, why don't you come and visit the Mayher Spiritual Center? You've been coming to these Baba meetings, you've been reading these Baba quotes. Why don't you come to the center and see what it's all about? At the same time, I had girlfriends that were saying to me, we're going to Florida. We're going to go and party and go dancing and be on the beach and just relax. And I was drawn actually both ways. Part of me wanted to figure out what was happening with Meher Baba, but another part of me, I'm a college student, I'm 18 years old. I just kind of wanted to have a girl time. So I went to Florida and I did whatever I was going to do for 4 days. And by then I was so sunburned and I was just partied out. You can't drink and dance that much and not be like, okay, I did that. I got on a bus and I went to Myrtle Beach. So the rest of my spring break was going to be at the center. So I had that beautiful meeting with Kitty, which most of us in the early days went to meet Kitty. And she had heard a little bit about me. I guess Jerry had been there and told her, I want this girl to come, and blah, blah. So Kitty said to me, you have a Catholic background or a Christian background? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, Baba didn't come to start a new religion. He came to draw the religions together like beads on a string. And I was kind of like, I'm there. And then she had this painting behind her head, you know, in her little kind of book room office. She had this painting, I think it was by Jim Meyer. So it was of a mountaintop, and on top you could see in the clouds like the face of Baba. So it was like the face of God in that setting. So as a little child coming from Japan, my father was a world-class runner and he loved mountain climbing. So all of my childhood, family vacation meant we're going to New Hampshire, we're going mountain climbing. And when we would get to the top of a mountain, my father would talk about God. He would wax philosophical. And we, all us little 5 kids, would sit there and listen to my father. And it seemed like, of course it's an athletic thing that you're doing, mountain climbing, but for him it was philosophical. You know, one could talk about things you might not talk about at the dinner table or at the hockey game, etc. So it was a very special time to have my father's, all of his time, and of course my mother, the whole family. So seeing this picture behind Kitty, it was like I could identify with that.
Wow.
My whole life I'd been mountain climbing and talking about God on the top of a mountain, and here was this painting, and it was very familiar. So I heard what Kitty said. She also said, if there's anything that Baba says that you like, you just incorporate it into yourself or your own philosophy. There's no conversion going on here. If you like what Baba says, it just makes your spiritual life richer. You add it on. So I thought about that. The next day, I went into the lagoon cabin. And of course, you take your shoes off before going in. So I told you I was born in Japan. My mother studied ikebana, which is Japanese flower arranging, and it has a philosophical element to it. So everything happens in threes. The top flower symbolizes God, the middle is man, and the lowest is earth, whether that's earth, or water, or stones. And one can extrapolate that to 5 or 7, but it's always odd numbers: God, man, earth. So, and in Japan, they have the dry gardens where they're doing that beautiful raking with the tines of the rake. At the center, early in the morning, various volunteers will rake the paths of the center. So as I approached the lagoon cabin, the path was raked beautifully clean. There was no leaf out of place. And I noticed the tines of the rake. You know, it's in my background. It was familiar to me. So I put my shoes on the steps and I went in. And I basically said to Baba, I know that you're a good man. I can see what you've done with Jerry Hodgin, whom I'd gotten to know a little bit better, some of the other Baba people that I had run into. I know that you're a good man, but I need to know if you're really God. There are many gurus in the world, there are many saints, but to be God in the world is singular, and I need to know that. I also need to know whether this is my path. It's clearly Jerry's path, or this one or that, but I don't know if it's my path. So I asked Baba to show me a sign that he was really God, and if this was my path. So I bowed to Baba, I left, and I went to put on my shoes. From 60 feet up in the air in this pine tree was the wisteria was blooming. And there was wisteria blossom in each shoe. Not indiscriminately all over the path or all over the little pine forest, just one in each shoe. So, you know, Baba works with each one individually. If he had put yellow daisies in my shoes, it would not have had the impact. But as a 18-year-old girl, purple was my favorite color. And wisteria have always been important to me because of my life in Japan. They're on so many of the Japanese monasteries train wisteria in various colors, mainly shades of purple. So I had said to Baba, "Are you really God?" And I knew because of Ikebana that came from the God position. It came from 60 feet up that tree. That has to mean I am God. I had also said, "Is this my path?" And here were these blossoms in each shoe. So to me, I knew what that meant. As Mimi, I knew what that meant. It was so distinctly designed to give me an immediate answer using the elements of nature. So I took that in, and I felt very shocked that the answer would come so fast. I thought I knew what it meant. I thought it was clear to me. But if you're going to give your life to someone, your allegiance, your faith, your trust, I wanted to be sure. So I walked down the steps from the lagoon cabin to the lagoon, to the boathouse. And I went out on the deck of the boathouse, and it was in the morning, so the water was very still, like glass. And I sat there, and I tell you, I was just like in shock, really, that I had come to this place where I had to ask Baba, "Are you really God? The big guy, God, not just a saint. And is this what I am supposed to follow for the rest of my life?" You don't do that lightly. And I wanted to be sure, like 100% sure. I was getting it. I think I know what you're saying. But I said to Baba, "This is what I'm getting. I think this is what you're saying to me. And if I'm right, confirm that I'm right." So at that moment, this big wind comes up over the ocean, over the dunes, and it starts rippling up the water of the lake. So it's not still anymore. The water's like doing this, and I'm looking out there, and the wind comes, and the water comes, and whoosh, I realize that I'm all wet. And the breeze has come, and the water has lifted, and I'm wet. And I'm taking this in, but I have this Catholic background, and they all believe in baptism, that you baptize a child at the beginning of its life. You dedicate this baby or this child to a life, a path with God. So I felt like Baba was saying to me, "We're washing you clean." From this moment, it's a new journey. Everything in the past is forgiven. Everything is washed new. And you go forth on a new path. This is your dedication. This is your life. It is your path. I am God. And you are accepted. Maybe another person, distinct from me, it wouldn't have that meaning. But to me, because I had come through this Catholic thing about baptism, I knew it ushered me a brand new start. then I didn't question anymore. I was like, okay, I get it. I'm yours. And you are God. So that's the story.
What year was that, Mimi?
Let's see. 70. Let's see, when did I go to college? 71. Must have been 72. Just turned 72. Yeah. So I missed Baba in the body. But you know, the Mandali would always say, how is it? You know, we knew Baba. We were around him. We could see his smile, get his embrace. How is it that those of you come to Baba and you never met him? To them, that was the miracle, that we all came, but we never met him. So it had to be that Baba gave us conviction inwardly, because it couldn't have been outer. Yeah. Okay. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
I guess there's one thing that's similar in this story to when I told the one about Mother Teresa, you know, how I just kind of blurted out, we're going to see Mother Teresa. I feel like Baba prompted this whole story. He set it up from the first inkling in my head to when we actually got to Japan and made this ascent up Mount Fuji. So to kind of set the pattern here, I had read a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And, you know, many people in creative fields have read this book and started doing morning pages. So the idea is you get up in the morning, and before you do your to-do list and get involved in the day, you take personal time and you just write 3 pages. So I had started doing this practice, and the idea is to tap your inner intuitive and to give time for that to come forward. So in the middle of doing my morning pages, it came up. My father had passed away mountain climbing in British Columbia. He was an avid mountain climber, and he had a hiking stick from climbing Mount Fuji many times with the Buddhist monks. And they have a beautiful, it's like a staff, and it's octagonal, so it has facets as you go around the staff. At the top is tied some red ribbons, two little Buddhist bells, and burned into these facets on the staff are what's called a chop. It's kind of like a branding iron. So the different elevations on the mountain, the hut crew will have a fire with a little branding iron, and they'll burn into your stick the elevation of the mountain. It might be the name of that hut, or a little philosophy that relates to that stage of the pilgrimage. Because climbing Mount Fuji is essentially a pilgrimage. One usually starts at the foot of the mountain, and of course, from the paintings and woodblock prints you've seen, Mount Fuji is conical. It sits by itself. It's not part of a mountain chain. I believe it's called a monadnock. It sits by itself. So it's rimmed by a lake, and of course, the clouds often get stuck on Mount Fuji because it's kind of in the way from the elevation. The elevation, I believe, is roughly 12,500 feet. So it's high, and it usually has clouds hovering. Of course, they're reflected in the lake. So it's a very picturesque scene. My father loved Mount Fuji, was one of his favorite mountains in the world, and it had that element that you climb this mountain for a philosophical reason. You don't just climb it like it's an athletic adventure. You have an intent in your mind, a prayer, and you climb the mountain to prove to God that you're serious about this intent and that you want Him to notice and answer your prayer. So I'm writing my morning pages, and I'm remembering the things my father said to me about this pilgrimage. And I thought, I know he had that staff. And now, since he's passed away, I want that staff. That is the one thing that symbolizes my father and the import of him. And I want that. So I finish my pages. I call my mother. Where's that hiking stick from Mount Fuji? I would love to have that as a symbol of my father's life. And she said, I don't have it. So I called all my brothers and sisters, all 5 of them, who has this staff? And they all, no one knew. So I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And I realized in my youth, my father was always taking us mountain climbing, us 5 kids, but he also took others, some of the other runners that he had coached or people that were interested in mountain climbing. Sometimes we went to Mount Washington in the winter, and we climbed with crampons, ice axes, gear. I remember one time one of my brothers or sisters fell, and they're just sliding down this mountain, and we're way above tree line. So once you start a slide, goodbye. Luckily, I think one of my other brothers and sisters just started praying, Our Father, who art in heaven. And somehow, I guess my brother rolled over and crammed the ice axe over his head into the snow. And somehow it caught. And then he was able to, you have to kind of kick your way in like a step, like that. So at any rate, I realized my father was always bringing people mountain climbing. And he could easily have given that staff to a fellow hiker. So that was a dilemma. But I realized Baba set this whole thing up. And the impact I got when I realized I couldn't just call up somebody and get it, I realized Baba hit me in the forehead with a brick. You can't borrow anyone else's spiritual experience. You have to earn it. So I thought, I have to go to Mount Fuji. I have to climb that mountain. I have to earn my own stick. Then I will know what that meant to my father. And then I'll have that peak experience that he had, climbing with the Buddhist monks, understanding the prayer that it is, the pilgrimage that it is to climb that mountain. So that's how Baba hit me in the head. You have to go to Mount Fuji. You have to climb. And I thought, I don't have the money to do that. I'm an artist. I'm like hand to mouth. I sell something and I pay for food. It's like, how am I going to get to Japan and climb this mountain? So I just put it in the back of my head. Okay. You see how Baba's setting it up, right? So as time goes on, I was in a relationship with Marshall Hay. Some of you know him. And at one point we started to talk about getting married. And he said to me, just kind of casually one day, he said, where would you like to go for a honeymoon? You can see, guess what I blurted out? I have to go to Mount Fuji. I have to climb this mountain. I have to get this hiking stick. He just nodded his head, and he kind of took it in, and he said, okay, it sounds great. I've always wanted to go to Japan. I don't think he did, but at least he said it, right? So the plan was we'd get married, we'd spend 3 weeks in Japan traveling around. I wanted to see some of the places I had lived as a child, and we'd work in this 2 or 3 days to climb Mount Fuji. And then we'd spend 2 weeks in India. So there was a American girl married to a Japanese guy, Baba lovers, that were living near Tokyo, actually on the coast more. But Marshall knew them, and so we could write to them and tell them that we wanted to come, and they helped us organize the whole trip. And they figured out the days that we would climb Mount Fuji. So in America, it's very hard to get any information about Mount Fuji. And this is 1999. So it's really before everybody had computers. You couldn't just, hey Siri, what's the best route to take? You know, I mean, you were on your own. And the Japanese information was all in kanji, which I could not read, you know, the characters. So you couldn't really prep this trip. You were just gonna, willy-nilly, we were gonna kind of fall on it, right? So we get to Japan, the days come about that we're about to make this ascent, and we managed to get to the foot of the mountain, and I just figured, let's pick the oldest route, because my father would have been climbing in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. So the mountain's conical, there's 5 different ascents up, but we just kind of figured, let's find the oldest route, the oldest pilgrim route. Usually, pilgrims would go to a shrine at the foot of the mountain, and they would fast, shower, they might weave their own sandals out of straw, cleanse themselves to prepare for a pilgrimage. But Marshall and I just stumbled on it, no preparation. And I thought, well, maybe we could get some bicycles and we could bike out to a shrine or a temple and at least say some prayers, or, you know, at a lot of temples in Japan, there's a basin of water and you wash your hands, you clean your mouth as if you're cleansing your thoughts, and then you ring a bell and you kind of bow. It's part of a process of getting ready for something. But it turned out that we were kind of too late to rent bikes. It was too late, the shrine was closed. So we just went in, we were staying in a youth hostel because I figured that's where you would run into other hikers. It turns out that we were going to climb the next day. There were all these world-class runners at this youth hostel. There was a marathon up the mountain starting the next day, and my father was an Olympic runner. He had run all over the world, raced, had 1 million medals. So willy-nilly, we land on this pilgrimage on the one day a year that there is a world-class race up Mount Fuji. And it's another one of Baba's, you know, coincidences. So I naively thought to myself, I can run. I'm always like in shape. Maybe I'll run a little. But I had no idea the terrain of this mountain. It's like nothing like this exists in America. So we were talking with various people, some from Australia, Tanzania, all over the place, about this thing the next day, and they agree the route that the marathon goes is the route that we had chosen to take. So early in the morning, this youth hostel was set up where women were on one side and men were on the other. It was just divided that way. And I knew we had to get up very early so that we would leave by bus to at least a beginning station of the mountain. So I woke up early and I went into the ladies' room and I'm brushing my teeth, trying to prepare. This is a pilgrimage, and I knew I had to be in the right framework to really absorb the experience. So I'm brushing my teeth and I'm thinking, Baba, I am such a bad pilgrim. I haven't prepared, I haven't showered, I haven't made my sandals, I haven't prayed for 3 days, I haven't fasted, I haven't done any of those things that one does as a good pilgrim. I'm brushing my teeth and I'm just feeling so unworthy. In Japan, to communicate to many people a certain message, they often use these megaphones. So that morning, off goes this megaphone over the youth hostel. It's music, but it's Begin the Beguine. So I'm sitting there, brushing my teeth, feeling like this terrible pilgrim. And Begin the Beguine is the wake-up call that morning for all the hikers around the world. And I just realized, Mimi, you have not earned this experience. It's not by any of your effort or little things you do that make a pilgrimage. It's all by His grace. It was His grace that planted the seed that I had to go. It was His grace that got us there. And it's His grace that's going to carry us up the mountain. It's not by any good deed on my part. This is His gift. So at the same time, Marshall's in the men's room, and he's brushing his teeth, and he's thinking, oh God, what am I doing? You know, I love this woman, I want to support her, but he prays to Baba, you gotta get me up this mountain. Like, I'm willing, but he's not in shape, he doesn't have good knees, but his heart was willing. So he just prayed to Baba, please get me up this mountain. And then he hears the megaphone, Begin the Beguine. So he knows that Baba's going to get him up the mountain. Later he will say, you have to be more clever with Baba. You got to be like a lawyer, every detail. Because he didn't say, get me down. And later, that was the far harder task because of the pounding that one does to get him down. But at any rate, we wake up, we get all our stuff. You're basically starting, it's like Myrtle Beach in August. It's very humid, it's 95 degrees, and it's just sweaty wet. So you're just in like shorts and a shirt. But you have to carry a down parka, hat, gloves, because the mountain always has snow on the top, and the top is cold. The goal is to reach the top in the dark and watch the sun rise over Japan. That's the ultimate experience. And that gives you the sunrise chop on your stick, which I wanted. So we had to start climbing in the day. We get to this beginning station, we buy our sticks with the little bells and the red ribbons, and we start climbing. Originally, you're on kind of a jeep road. It's like a dirt road, and there's trees. You're in the tree line. So as you're going and going, we did learn a couple of things in America. And one was, don't eat anything from a mountain hut, because it'll kill you. And don't drink the water, because the water's not clean. And don't sleep in a mountain hut, because they pack you in like sardines, and in America, like, that's not cool. So we did know that. But we climb and climb, and by all day long we're going now. By 8 o'clock at night, we'd run out of granola bars, water. And we saw this mountain hut. And by this point, we're at about 9,000 feet, where you can really start to feel the elevation. And I have sort of sinus sensitivities. So I have a barely screaming headache by this point. And you see that hut, and it looks really good. It's like a stone igloo, has some kind of a roof, you're way above tree line. And I thought, let's stop. Let's see what's going on. So they were serving like a beef curry. It looked good. I thought, they're cooking it, it's hot. You know, we were out of granola bars, so we ate it. And then they served, I guess you could get sake, beer, green tea. The green tea, that's good, well, we can have green tea. And then we realized, had we gone out and continued climbing, we would have been too early. Like we would have reached the summit by, say, midnight. But then you have to wait for sunrise. In Japan, that's 4 a.m. sunrise. So you don't want to be up there at -20 and wait for 4 hours. Not cool. So the idea was that we would climb up this ladder and go into the bunk room. So the hut is set up like a rectangle, and the tables are all long, like in a boarding school. So you just sit next to everybody on the benches, and it was pretty calm. We decided, okay, we'll sleep for a few hours, and then at midnight we'll try to finish the last segment. So we're climbing up this little ladder, and I see a flashcard, like a white flashcard with the letters, lines, and it says in kanji, you know, the symbols, underneath in English, no smorking. What does that mean? Does it mean no smoking? Does it mean like no messing around? I didn't know what it meant, but I figured, all right, keep climbing. One of the hut crew was showing us what to do. We were the only Americans all summer. And the climbing season is only about a few months in the year because of the summer. You have to go in the summer. So we get up, and it's a bunk room. So you have 2 long, like shelves along the wall. One lower, one upper. On the other side, a lower and upper. And then they have a futon, like a quilt, an army blanket, another army blanket, and then another futon. And it's really cold. I mean, by this point, you're in your parka hat, gloves, everything, right? And he explains, you take off your boots, you put them under the shelf, there's a nail for your pack, and you get in between the army blankets. So there's no sheets. You don't have your own bed. It's one communal bed. And one army blanket ends, the next one starts. So there wasn't anyone else in there. So it looked fine at the beginning. Marshall takes the wall, okay? So I'm next. So whoever else is getting in this bed is sleeping with me, right? The whole way down the road. So various other people get the same idea. They're going to sleep for a few hours, and then we're going to get back out again. I have this screaming headache. It's just throbbing and throbbing. But of course, you're all in your clothes. So I have my down parka, my hat. We get in the bed, and initially you're lying like straight. You can lie on your back, right? But everybody else starts coming up that ladder, and they're rustling. Everything's wrapped in a plastic bag, their camera, their this or that. Whole groups come up, and they all get in the bed with you. So by this point, everyone is lying on their side like this, straight, right? And so there's like 5 people under one army blanket. And someone coughs, and the whole thing turns like this. And now everybody's like spooning on this side. And that goes on, like every 20 minutes, the whole bed rolls. And I finally got the idea. Oh, this is what they meant. They pack you in like sardines. That's the idea. So I think I was only in the bed for maybe 2 hours. And then I was like, oh man, I can't hack this. But it's like, when in Japan, you got to do what everyone else is doing. But by then, my head hurt too much. I was really like, not good. So I climb out. I put my boots on, and I go back down the steps. And by that point, there's a lot of people downstairs all along those tables. Some people are standing on the tables, and there's like beer drinking songs going on, sake and this and that. Everybody's partying and having a great time. And one of the hut crew says something to me, Ohayo gozaimasu, Mimi-san, which means good morning, Mimi. And I look at my watch, I go, it's midnight, you know, like, you should all be asleep. But he goes, oh no, it's morning, time to go. And I somehow explain like, oh, my head is like throbbing. So they take me into the little corner that's the kitchen, and they try to explain to me to gargle with hot salt water backwards. So rather than just tip the cup like this, they somehow want you to tip it so you're doing this side. So it's basically like a mess, right? It's like pouring the wrong way. But I don't know what it does. Opens up some different part of your neck or your air passage, but I'm like, okay. So they tell me, go out to the trail, which is right outside the door, and it's like this wide, no guardrail, sheer face going down from there, because you're way above tree line. It's just rock. So I go, okay. I go outside, I do my little gargle from the backside. I don't think it does a thing for my head. But everybody else seems to know that they can use oxygen. So they have this can, it looks like Ready Whip. You know, it's red with a white cap. And they pop the cap, put it over their nose and squirt. So they're using oxygen. So Marshall comes, we decide we're just gonna get on the trail and go. So the trail is like zigzag trail. You're going up, but you're zigzagging. It's way too steep to just go straight up. So you follow along. The trail is like this wide, so it's like front to back. It's not even shoulder to shoulder. It's just one after the other. And the Japanese all climb with a miner's light on their head, so their hands are free, because at some point you're just scrambling over boulders. You're kind of pulling yourself along. So I looked down the mountain, and it was like ants climbing up the mountain. The zigzag trail, everybody with a little light. The people are tiny, because you know they're like way down, but you see this in thousands of people are climbing, thousands. So we get in line, and you are going, it's very cold, and people stop and squirt. They take 10 steps, stop, squirt, 10 steps, stop, squirt. I'm thinking, we are never gonna make it by 4 o'clock. And I start to feel like, oh, Baba, this is my only chance to do this. It's not like I can come back next year and try again. This is it. So even though this was our honeymoon, I said to Marshall, I have to do this. I have to now bushwhack up this mountain, forget the trail. I have to make it. And he says to me, go, go. So I get out of line, and I'm just climbing as hard as I can to make this ascent. I don't even know where I'm supposed to go. You know, there's no directions, there's no map, but I just figure skirt the people and just go straight up. Eventually, I pass under a large red torii gate, and I figure I must be at the top. So just a little beyond that was a temple, looked like an igloo, a rock round thing with an entrance, and 2 stone foo dogs out front, like to ward off evil spirits as you go in. But nobody's in there. I go in, but nobody else is in there. And I realize it's pitch black, that people are standing around the rim Fuji is a crater. You don't stand in the middle. You stand around the rim. There's no guardrail. All the signs are in kanji. I can't understand anything. But I noticed that there are people standing like over there, and I assume they're looking at the lights of Tokyo. So I think, okay, I'll go over there. And you can see the city lights. Tokyo is not that far away. And it's like silent. Finally, Marshall comes up, he finds me, we're there together, and everyone is pin drop silent. There's thousands of people not saying anything, and they're all looking at the lights of Tokyo. And I don't know what they're looking at. But all of a sudden, I see, it was like the color of the inside of a watermelon, that pinky, corally red. It's just the tiniest sliver of the sun coming up. And everyone around me goes crazy. They're like crying and screaming and hugging each other. And, I mean, it's like communal bliss happening, from pin drop silent to like this incredible outburst. And someone somehow explains to me, they have climbed this mountain 10 times and they have never seen the sun. The mountain is always enshrouded by cloud. You can't see the sun. So to be able to see the sun is like big. It's an ultimate moment. And there it is. And it rises quickly, starts coming up. This amazing red, corally red color. And everyone is like having a spiritual experience around you. It's communal fervor going on. And then there are these little huts that sell green tea, beef curry, whatever. And they have megaphones on the top. And they start playing this music. Da-da, 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 da-da. It's like unbelievable, right? Everybody's happy. The sun, they can see the sun. So then, everyone is going to the little fire pit thing. They want that sunrise chop on their stick. And they cost maybe like 25 cents per chop. Well, I bought every chop I could buy along the mountain. I didn't want to miss anything. This is like my shot at it. So I get in line and I get my sunrise stamp, which of course is red, and it has the yellow rays of the sun. It's beautiful. I'm really happy. And then I notice that after that, everyone is buying postcards, and they're going to a little post office on top of Mount Fuji, and you can buy a sunrise stamp, and you can have that, you know, printed chop on your postcard that tells everybody you were there. You made it. You made it. So I didn't get in that line and do the postcard thing, but you could see everybody else was doing that, that it's a very communal experience. So we went into a little hut, we bought green tea and had something to eat or drink. Now, I'm so naive, so naive. So I'm thinking, well, what souvenir are you gonna bring home? And I keep seeing all these little ribbons with the bells, right? People have made their pilgrimage and they want to leave a little something so that God knows that that prayer is still on the mountain. But I thought they just left them there, right? So I'm like picking up these little ribbons and bells, and I'm thinking, you know, Arthur and Ellen gave us these coats, and maybe they'd like to have a little something from Mount Fuji. So I'm like pocketing everyone else's prayers. I'm like pocketing them, as many as I can pocket in my little coat. And down we go. So we try to choose a route down that was different. The route up was so rocky and intense, I felt bad for Marshall. So I thought, well, there's another route down that they use the word glissade, that you can, it's pumice rock, that you can slide down, supposedly. But if you have bad knees, that doesn't happen, right? And so you can slide a little, and then there's a big boulder, and you have to kind of clamber down this boulder. So down we go, and once you've made your choice, there's no tributary. You know, you're committed, you just keep going. So we eventually get down. It's very hard for Marshall, and I realize I can't carry him. If something goes wrong, there's no staff, there's no guardrail, there's nothing. We just have to be safe. So all you could do is pray, you know, oh Baba, you know, help us safely get down this mountain. So we managed to make it down, and there's the most beautiful lodge, you would call it, wooden lodge with decking all around it, looking at this silvery lake, the view of Mount Fuji reflected in the lake, etc. And some geisha had come from Tokyo that day to view the mountain. It was not supposed to be a cloudy day, so they knew they could see clearly. They were in linen kimono, so not a wrinkle, I mean so clean, with the white face makeup, beautiful hair arrangement with hair sticks, and gorgeous. And we looked like we'd come out of a coal mine. Because of the pumice, the black soot, it's everywhere, and it's 95 degrees like Myrtle Beach, and you're sweating, and then you've got this like black soot all over you. We'd run out of water. There wasn't much water on the trail. I think I was as dirty as I have ever been in my life. And we wind up on this deck next to these geisha, and I just thought, oh my God, this is like embarrassing. But somehow you just keep going, right? So we get on the bullet train, which is famous in Japan, the Shinkansen. It's the fast train. It's one of the fastest trains in the world, and it is so clean. It's white. Even the bathrooms, white tile. You could have a picnic in the bathroom. It's so clean, and we are so dirty. But we had the staff, the climbing stick, and it doesn't telescope down. It just is what it is. So it doesn't fit in your backpack or anything. You just have to carry it. So everywhere we went for the next 2 weeks in Japan, you just had to carry that stick. But people would stop on the street opposite or wherever they were. If they saw you with that stick, it's like a universal symbol. Every good Buddhist must climb Mount Fuji and make that pilgrimage. So people would just stop in their tracks, Fuji-san, Fuji-san, and make these incredible acknowledgments that you came all the way from wherever you came, but you climbed that mountain. You like got it, you know, that's the thing to do. So I felt like everywhere we went, there was that exultation. You got it. You got that stick. It means something.
Wow.
But you can see how Baba set it up from in my little bed writing my morning pages, that Baba created that sense. You have to earn that spiritual experience. You can't borrow anyone else's experience. You have to walk the walk and earn it yourself. And yet, it wasn't by any of my grace or good doing. He planted the seed. He created the timing. That here I was trying to have that experience of my father. He landed us there in the middle of a marathon, these world-class runners, the whole thing. I mean, Baba really set it up.